Durham for an announcement today. Before we begin, I just want to remind everyone to please keep yourselves on mute. We will be taking questions following the end of the announcement and after everyone has had a chance to speak. If you do have a question, please put your name and outlet into the chat box below, or raise your hand using the raise your hand function, and I'll individually unmute you to ask your question at that time. And to begin with some introductory remarks, I'll turn it over to the Honourable Peter Bethlenfalvy to begin. Minister.
Well, thank you, Derek, and it's a great honor to be here today. And I want to first off acknowledge my great colleagues, starting with Minister Lisa MacLeod, also MPP Lorne Park from Whitby, MPP Lindsey Park from Durham, and of course Rod Phillips, who couldn't make it today, but is an active member in the community and all things Durham. And so he passes on his regrets. He had a conflict today. And I also want to welcome Kathleen Hutton, Executive Director of the Boys and Girls Club of Durham. And particularly, I'd like to thank all the people that work day in, day out on the Ontario Trillium Foundation, and particularly the Resilient Communities Fund. You know, folks, this year has been like no other. Yeah. And we really rely all the time, but especially in this COVID world, on our nonprofit organizations who really help build, you know, healthy and vibrant communities, not only in Pickering-Uxbridge, where I'm from, but Durham region and really all of Ontario. And these organizations work tirelessly, adapting to the changes in the environment that we faced for the last 10 months. And these investments, which Lisa will go into more detail about, really support our nonprofit organizations, help you rebuild and recover from the impacts of the pandemic, because you enrich the lives of those so many in the community who need our support. And these funds really can be applied to support a range of needs such as mental and physical health and well-being for staff and for volunteers, you know, creating new health and safety processes, purchasing of new technology and PPE, renovations and facility updates. These are some of the things that these funds can be used for. And while we work towards recovery, we're really proud to support in the Ontario government programs like the Ontario Trillium Foundation, Resilient Communities Fund, that are making such a positive contribution in communities here in the Durham region and beyond. I'd like now to take a moment to introduce Minister Lisa MacLeod, who, as you mentioned, is our Minister of Heritage, Sport, Tourism and Cultural Industries. You know, I've worked very closely with Minister MacLeod, and you will find no greater champion and advocate for our communities across the province than Lisa MacLeod. She has a complex portfolio of heritage, sport, tourism, and culture, as I just said, which covers a range of activities, and they've been hit especially hard in this COVID-19 environment. And I can think of no better person to lead that ministry. She's tireless, she's smart, and she advocates and she talks to everybody. So I'm very proud to work with Lisa MacLeod, and I'm very proud to introduce her today, to lend her strong voice as a leader and advocate at Queen's Park, not just for Pickering-Uxbridge and Durham today, but all of Ontario. And she'll share further details on today's announcement. So over to you, Minister MacLeod.
Thank you very much, Minister Bethlenfalvy, or as I like to call him, as my seatmate in the cabinet table, is El Presidente. So it's wonderful to be here. It's wonderful to be here with Peter and Lorne and Lindsey. And Lindsey was joining, and Lorne were joining me yesterday as we walk through some changes that the ministry is making as a result of the recent lockdown. It's also wonderful to be here with our President and CEO of the Ontario Trillium Foundation, Catherine Vanbrick. It's wonderful to see you, Catherine. And of course, Kathleen Hutton from the Boys and Girls Club of Durham. I really wanted to make this province-wide announcement for the Ontario Trillium Foundation today with my colleagues from the Durham region, because as you know, they are a very large region and a growing population. And just outside the GTHA, I thought it was great. It really, the growth that they're seeing reminds me of my own constituency in Nepean inside of Ottawa. And so I really wanted to be there. And of course, because Peter is such a great friend, as is Lorne and Lindsey, to share some great news. Now, Peter mentioned my portfolio is quite complex, and many of the media that are on here today and many of the industry partners that I work with often hear about me talking about a spectacular double bottom line. And often we talk about the economic part of my portfolio, which represents about $75 billion in the economy. It has such industries as film and television, book production, professional sports, some of the biggest names in the world like Air Canada and of course all of our hotels. And so from that perspective, on the double bottom line, we are an economic driver in Ontario. We are larger than the agriculture, mining and forestry sectors put together. We're also larger than the GDP of Manitoba. Today, I want to talk a little bit more about the social bottom line. This ministry has the largest volunteer sector in all of Canada. We work through Ontario Trillium Foundation and Ontario Arts Council, two of our agencies, very much so with the not-for-profit sector, making sure that we're in every single community in every single part of this province. We also are really responsible for the cultural fabric of why you love to live where you live. We support those types of programmings and those types of institutions that make us proud to be where we're from. And so that's why today I'm pleased to announce on behalf of our agency, Ontario Trillium Foundation, that of its $103 million annual budget, they repurposed $83 million to a Resilient Communities Fund. Today I'm announcing $41 million in projects that will take place in 486 different locations across the province. Today, we're announcing $1.4 million for Durham region, including funding for the Boys and Girls Club of Durham. As my colleague mentioned, the COVID-19 outbreak has had a significant impact on all of Ontario's not-for-profit sectors, including the loss of revenue from canceling events, a steep drop off in donations, and reduced and lost ticket sales. We've seen disruptions and modification of services to clients and communities, reduced hours for workers and or staff layoffs, and concerns about workplace safety and the ability to meet public health guidelines to keep participants safe and volunteers intact. And we recognize that as a large volunteer sector that the Ontario Trillium Foundation represents, it's become much more difficult to attract and retain volunteers during this critical time. The organizations that applied and were successful today across Ontario are equipping their board members and employees with supports to implement new approaches, prepare for change and build resiliency. So, for example, this could be organizational training and coaching, strategic planning and implementation, research development, and very important mental and physical health and well-being supports. It also will allow them to improve and increase ability to access financial resources and develop new and or alternative sources of revenue, which has been very critical during this particular time. And finally, to allow them to adapt or reimagine the delivery of programs and services to meet the needs of community employees and volunteers. I'll speak briefly just about my conversation with Kathleen and how important the investment today into the Boys and Girls Club of Durham is. By allowing them to create 2 new rooms, they will be able to increase their individual spaces for more children. And for anybody that knows about the great work that the Boys and Girls Clubs do across this province, they turn children who come from vulnerable and at-risk circumstances into upstanding citizens. They give children a chance and a hand up. And when we support an organization like the Boys and Girls Club in any community, particularly in high growth communities like Durham, we do often get a very significant social and economic benefit from it. And so I'm pleased to be here today, very delighted to be with my colleagues for this significant announcement. And I would be remiss if I were not to point out that Catherine Vanbrick's team over at the Ontario Trillium Foundation is currently looking at the second intake that closed earlier in December, so we can make a further $40 million investment into our communities after the new year. In addition, you'll note that in the 2020 budget, in the Ontario budget, we were able to secure an additional $100 million over 2 years to the Ontario Trillium Foundation so that we can continue to build strong communities in a post-COVID-19 environment. So with that, I'll hand it over to my colleague, MPP Lorne Coe, who is also our caucus whip. So everyone has to be very nice to Lorne because he counts who's showing up for votes. And so, MPP Coe, I'd be happy to pass it over to you.
Well, thank you, Minister. I'm so pleased to be with you this morning and my colleagues from Durham, Minister Bethlenfalvy and Lindsey Park, the representative from Durham riding and the parliamentary assistant to the Attorney General. I'm really so proud of the hundreds of local organizations and thousands of volunteers, Minister, who have stepped up. over the last few months, and to me, showing the Ontario spirit and continuing the delivery of vital services and programming in the region of Durham. You spoke about the Boys and Girls Club, and yes, the Boys and Girls Club of Durham is a recipient, and Alzheimer's Society of Durham Region and Feed the Need Durham. They are the bedrock of the region of Durham. And today's funding is going to go a long way to allow them to continue the critical work that they have been doing for a long time, and helping people to rebuild their lives, but at the same time, help us together with our other partners to restart our economy and reopen the region of Durham. So Minister, thank you so much for this particular funding. It'll make such a difference in so many lives here in the region of Durham. And I'd like to, at this juncture, turn the discussion over to my colleague from Durham Riding, Lindsey Park.
Thank you, MPP Coe. And I'll keep my remarks brief, but I did just want to take the opportunity to say we all know the critical role nonprofits, charities, and volunteer organizations play in making up the social fabric of our communities. We see that in my riding of Durham. I know MPP Coe sees it in Whitby every day, and Peter Bethlenfalvy sees it in Pickering, Uxbridge, and Minister MacLeod, you see it in the Ottawa area. We know these are organizations in our community who often tirelessly are looking for ways on a daily basis to fill the gaps they notice in our communities at a moment's notice. And we've all seen that during the pandemic. And that's why I'm so pleased that early in the pandemic, Minister MacLeod and Premier Ford took leadership to find ways to strengthen that social fabric at this critical time. And this special Resilient Communities funding through the Ontario Trillium Foundation and so many other initiatives that Minister MacLeod has announced over the last year will provide timely supports and lasting benefits to our communities here in Durham and all across Ontario. Locally, these grants in my riding will help support Room 217 Foundation, Big Brothers and Big Sisters of North Durham, and Town Hall 1873 in Scugog. It will also support Autism Home Base Durham in Bowmanville and A Greener Future in Oshawa. Each one will use this funding to rebuild and help our community recover from the impacts of COVID-19. These Resilient Communities grants are going to largely volunteer-based initiatives across the province that enrich and strengthen the whole community. I want to congratulate each and every one of the recipients. We really look forward to seeing how your organization's unique touch enhances the community you serve. And with that, I'd like to welcome the Executive Director of Boys and Girls Club of Durham, Kathleen Hutton. Welcome, Kathleen.
Well, thank you, MPP Park, and good morning, everyone, and thank you for the opportunity to be with you this morning. I'd like to begin by saying a heartfelt thank you to Minister MacLeod and her team, the OTF, and the provincial government for their ongoing support during these very challenging times. The year 2020 has been a year that none of us has ever experienced before. With the emergence of COVID-19 in March that led to the shutdown of our province soon after, these unprecedented times have created many challenges for businesses and organizations. However, some of the hardest hit have been the not-for-profit, as we've previously heard. Boys and Girls Clubs across Canada are, examples of those not-for-profits that have been, faced with extremely challenging decisions over the last 10 months. We've made difficult decisions to have to lay off staff. Do we run an in-person summer camp, or do we shift gears and offer a free virtual camp? What does the school year look like for our children? And how can we offer an extended support system for the families in the communities that we serve? So we have struggled with these decisions every day since March 13th. And really trying to do what is best for the families that we serve in the communities, and all while trying to remain financially responsible and viable. fundraising has been interesting, to say the very least. However, I did have a conversation with someone a few weeks ago, and I really sort of responded in saying that 2020 has been an incredible year. And I say that it has been a year of incredible challenges. It's been a year of incredible decisions to be made. It's been a year of incredible creativity, a year of incredible opportunities to shift gears to meet the needs of the children and the youth and the families that we serve. An incredible year of watching my staff sort of step outside their comfort zone and develop new skills. So it's truly been an incredible year of resiliency. So through all of these incredible challenges, our community continues to be committed to the Boys and Girls Club of Durham, and truly today is no different. So on behalf of the Boys and Girls Club, I'd like to thank you for your continued support and look forward to a much brighter 2021. So with that, thank you, and I will pass it back to Derek.
Thank you very much, everyone. And Minister, I'll turn it to you.
I would love to, at the moment, if it's possible, just to ask my friend and our CEO and president of the Ontario Trillium Foundation, Kathleen Vanbrick, to say a few words, if she wouldn't mind, just about the Resiliency Fund, but also the way we were able to pivot early on in the pandemic to support these sectors.
Minister MacLeod, thank you, and for everybody for joining us this morning. You know, I can still remember our team on March 13th, and then the next week saying we needed things differently. This is unprecedented what we're seeing here and what can be done. And I think it's been said already, but what strikes us as an OTF team is how challenged the sector is right now, both in terms of fundraising and losing some sources of funding, while at the same time the need for their services has just increased tenfold. And we are so pleased to have continued to be able to have money from the government, that we pivoted to this resilience fund. The thing that keeps me going every day is knowing how while it's a little bit of money for each organization, how they leverage that in communities and really makes a difference. And that makes me getting up every morning to continue to do the great work. We are so thankful for the additional money as well that the government is entrusting us with, that we will be able to get out over the next 2 years. So a huge thank you to the volunteer, the nonprofit and charitable sector for the work that they do. And we're just very honored to be able to be that conduit between the government and getting that money into communities.
Thank you very much, Catherine. With that, everyone, we will go to a Q&A with the Minister and our other speakers. I will ask you, if you do have a question from the media, please put your name and outlet into the chat function below, and we'll individually unmute you to ask your question. Minister, our first question comes from Natalia Goodwin, who's with CBC Ottawa. Natalia, I will unmute you, and if you want to accept on your phone, you can ask your first question.
Okay, thank you. Minister MacLeod, the question I have today is about cross-border travel here in the National Capital Region. You know, the NCC came out yesterday and told us that all of their sites are open on both sides of the river. So should people be going to use those sites, such as Gatineau Park, to go skiing and such?
Thanks, Natalia, and I appreciate this. My recommendation, both as an Ottawa MPP, an Ontario Cabinet Minister, and I'll say this as Minister of Tourism, that right now, as both Gatineau and Ottawa are proceeding into lockdown, there should be no travel except for essential travel. For example, if you're a healthcare provider and you work in Gatineau, obviously you're essential and that should occur. If you're a construction worker and you're helping build, housing developments in Ottawa, that is also something we would deem essential. I think at this moment, there are a number of recreational facilities on either side of the border, which residents in either city or either province can participate in. As Minister of Sport and Recreation, we have worked hard to have many of those winter sports available in not only Ottawa, but across Ontario. So my recommendation, my very strong recommendation, is for all residents of Ottawa and obviously the residents of Gatineau to only travel if it's required, and if it's for work or it's for a medical necessity.
Okay, and just Yeah, thank you. So in terms of that self-isolation, would that not apply then to people who have to go over to Gatineau to work but may live here in Ottawa?
Well, I think, look, the reality is we do have essential workers on either side of the border that work on either side of the border. I think the issue that we're talking about is travel that's non-essential. I think that one of the concerns we had early on in the pandemic was some of the issues at the border. We'd like to keep the border open, but we'd want and encourage everyone to be responsible. At the end of the day, we do not want to overload our healthcare capacity any more than it is. Yesterday our cases in Ottawa were good at 19. Today we're up to 48. We lost an Ottawa resident last night to COVID-19. So I think that it's really important that we continue to talk about the very, important public health and safety measures that each government has put in place on either side of the border.
Thank you very much, Natalia. Minister, your next question comes from David Haynes with QP Briefing. David, I will unmute you, and if you just want to accept on your phone, you can ask your question.
Great, thank you. And I want to say a very happy holidays to everyone. Merry Christmas, Happy New Year. Hope everything is nice and healthy. All those good things. On the subject of the OHL, the guidance that we saw that we saw the other day had some special exceptions for pro sports leagues, high performance athletes, and so on. Can you please explain how the OHL fits into this framework and what the current status is in terms of, what kind of considerations are you talking about when their season might start, or whether they might have a season?
Thanks very much, David. I was expecting an Order of Ontario question from you. Maybe I'll get it in the supplement. And happy holidays to you as well. Okay, in terms of the high performance athletes and the professional athletes, that was something that we arrived to back in the spring when we were in the first stage of lockdown. And we arrived at that because we wanted to make sure that our high performance athletes, i.e. Our Olympic athletes who are headed to Tokyo would be able to continue to train. And so we have a performance center just in Scarborough, the Canadian Sport Institute of Ontario, that has rigorous standards and protocols in place in order to protect the athletes. And so that will continue. So Penny Alexiak will be able to continue to train in the pool and hopefully come back home from Tokyo with more medals. It also allows our professional sports organizations, like right here in my city, the Ottawa Senators, or in Toronto with the Maple Leafs, or even the Raptors or the Blue Jays, if they were training in their location, to be able to continue to train at their conditioning facilities as well. Again, with rigorous testing, sanitation protocols, and social distancing. And so those are that will maintain. With respect to the OHL, they would not fall under that. They would be seeking a return to play. And at this point, we do not have any further guidance from the Chief Medical Officer of Health to allow them to do that return to play. So that work is ongoing. And right at the moment, we are focused, as my colleagues would indicate, on getting our healthcare system at a capacity where it's not overloaded. That is our number one priority, particularly during the lockdown. We're not looking at easing restrictions at the moment. We're looking at many, all parts of the province seeing increased restrictions.
Follow up?
Yeah. So as we have a lockdown in parts of the province a lockdown in parts of the province that will go until late January. It seems as though time to have a hockey season for the league, it might be running short. Is a cancellation of the season something that's on the table? And if there is some kind of cancellation of that season, would there be some kind of financial package for the league to help tide them through this time?
I'll answer it this way. I think it would be the league that would make the determination on whether or not they would cancel. I just can't say today that they have clearance from the Chief Medical Officer of Health. They don't. So I don't know what that will look like for them. In terms of remuneration, I have the Treasury Board President here, and he is really consumed right now with making sure we have adequate supports for our healthcare system, our long-term care homes, making sure that our education system is well equipped, and then of course to ensure that we have a lot of supports in terms of business supports that are available that we announced the other day. And with respect to sport, we will be announcing a little bit more money for sport in the new year that will come through the budget commitments that we had in the 2020 budget. But at this point in time, those conversations are still non-committal, and they're at the moment not at a level where we would even understand what their request would be on a variety of different return to play or not return to play. So I think not to try and not answer you, but at the moment we have no definition on that at this time.
Thank you very much, David. Just a reminder to media on the phone, if you do have a question, please put your name and outlet into the chat function below, and I'll individually unmute you. Minister, your next question comes from John Chidley-Hill with the Canadian Press. John, you're unmuted. You can.
Thanks. Good morning, Minister.
Hey, John, how are you?
I'm doing well, thank you. How are you?
I'm pretty good, thanks.
That was not my question, though.
Oh, darn, that was an easy one.
Since we last spoke, the NHL has announced its plan to play, and the first day of its schedule is January 13th. I'm curious, with 2 NHL teams in the province, but the province will be still in lockdown, how will that work? Because my understanding is the framework as it stands only provides for practice and training. It doesn't provide for games, which require a lot more staff.
Yeah, you're right. So the exemptions that are there right now is for only training facilities for high performance athletes and professional athletes, which has remained unchanged since the beginning of the pandemic back in the spring. With respect to the NHL, I know I see Bruce on the line there, so he's probably going to follow up on one of these questions too. We continue to meet with the provinces and the federal government that have NHL teams in their cities, and so those conversations are ongoing. I believe we have a meeting today. It's obviously very complex given, I'll speak for Ontario, we would need clearance from Ottawa's public health officer, Toronto's public health officer, the chief medical officer of health, and then it would all ultimately go to cabinet for a decision. And that would happen in every other single province as well that has a team. But the good news is the conversations are ongoing. I have regular conversations with our friends at the Toronto Maple Leafs and the Ottawa Senators, and the discussions are moving along nicely. But I think we also are cognizant of the fact that we are in right now a public health crisis. And my goal and every other member's goal in our government is to ensure that there is fewer people traveling during this period than ever before. Previous to this, obviously Ottawa was in a different situation than Toronto. It wasn't in lockdown, and so we're looking at not only different public health units, but also in those different public health units, different healthcare circumstances. Having said that, in my conversations with Dr. Vera Etches, who is our Chief Medical Officer of Health in my city, she seemed, when I had spoken with her, to be relatively supportive of an NHL return and our Senators playing at home here.
As a follow-up with the OHL, they're scheduled to begin in early February, but they have 3 American teams. Do you have any update on how those 3 American teams will be handled in terms of crossing the border, maybe playing their season in Ontario? Do you have any insight?
Yeah, well, just like with MLB and the NBA, those decisions on border crossings between international borders would be made by the federal government. And so those are key considerations that they would have to take into effect and implement. So it wouldn't be our level of government. We would look at what a return to play would look like and what that would mean in terms of sanitation, social distancing in the arena before they get on the rink, whatever. So that would be very much them.
Thank you so much, John. Minister, your next question comes from Bruce Garrick with Post Media Ottawa. Bruce, I will unmute you if you just accept it on your phone. You're free to speak.
Hi, Minister McLeod.
Hey, Bruce.
Just as a follow-up to John.
You guys are so predictable.
Just what has the NHL given you any kind of timeline on when they want a decision? Because they are supposed to release their schedule this afternoon. Is there any sense that you could have a decision as early as today, or are we looking at after Christmas now?
Well, look, I'll say this. We recognize that the NHL and the NHLPA did a lot of work on the weekend to come to a resolution on what the schedule would look like or how many games they would play. We recognize as sport ministers across the province that this is something that's very timely and important for them. And so that's why we're meeting regularly and looking at every available option. And they also recognize in my conversations with the senators and the Leafs that we are in a very real public health crisis, and that the priority right now of our government is to make sure that Ontarians are safe and healthy, and that our hospital capacity is not overwhelmed. So that's the biggest issue for us right now. But we recognize, and that's why we're meeting regularly. We understand that they need a decision, and they would need one soon if they are to resume at all in January.
Do you get the sense that they would like all provinces to be on board if they're going to go ahead with this, or can one province be an outlier and the other, the other 4 provinces accept the deal?
The NHL would be best to answer that, but I would expect that their main desire would be to have a Canadian division, and if 1 or 2 provinces weren't able, then it will be potential. There probably would be a potential to play out of a different city in a province that was allowing that, but we're not at that point yet. But I think that just my discussions and my discussions have been with the NHL teams, not with the NHL at the moment yet. But the preference would be a Canadian-wide division, and that's certainly what's been communicated to me, and I believe to the others.
Thank you very much, Bruce. Minister, your last question comes from Zachary Rothier with Radio Canada. Zachary, if you want to accept on your end, you're free to speak.
Greetings, everybody. Hello, Minister McLeod. So from hockey, just moving on to ski.
Okay.
Yeah, I just wanted a little more context about why are ski hills closed under the plan, seeing as many other outdoor activities and facilities are permitted or open. I just wanted to know more about what's the public health logic behind it.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I know Peter sits around the cabinet table with me too. This is something that was debated. We worked with the Chief Medical Officer of Health. We've accepted the determination that at this time, ski hills should remain closed so that we could make sure to keep the population safe. Skating and dog sledding, some of these more individual sports can allow for greater physical distancing. And there was a concern that there might be a spread of the virus, or there could be a potential spread of the virus if we did continue to operate chairlifts and that sort of thing. So it's one we had hoped to have a resolution on prior to this lockdown, but given the new circumstances and the direction the government has taken with the shutdown, we weren't able to open them at this time. And I know that's very frustrating for a lot of people, including a lot of my colleagues and my friends. But it was a determination by the health table and ultimately accepted by our cabinet.
Thanks, Zachary. Do you have a follow-up?
Yeah, just a quick one. Now I'm in Northern Ontario, right here. I'm in Sudbury Green Zone. I just wanted to know, what about Northern Ontario? Why apply the same measure where cases are very low? And are there additional supports in place to help stations here?
Yeah, maybe I'll take a crack at it, and I'll flip it over to Peter as well, because when you're looking at supports, the president of the Treasury Board certainly looks at that. We decided to take a whole of province approach on this. It's not been, it wasn't an easy decision for any of us to take, and it was one we continually worked on as a government to make sure that we were protecting the population. One concern, obviously, we have is the mobility of people and spreading over the holidays. So we wanted to protect those that were in the green, yellow, and even in orange, so that their caseloads wouldn't increase. We are always going to be concerned and consumed by the capacity in our hospitals, and some of our larger urban hospitals, even in my city where we increased 254 new beds since November, we're still at over 100% capacity in all of our hospitals. And third, is the long-term care homes. We need to continue to protect them. So that's why Northern Ontario and the rest of the province are in the shutdown. And then I'll just turn it over to Peter if he'd like to add some comments on that, and perhaps even add some points on the government supports.
Yeah, thank you, Lisa, and thank you, Zachary. Great question. Bonne question. Number one, as Lisa just said, and we've seen it in Durham where people, when Toronto and Peel was gray, they would come here to Durham in busloads, and the numbers in Durham started to spike. We've seen that happen in multiple places. So to really have an effective approach to reduce numbers, this is the way that the medical team has really recommended we do it. And to Lisa's point, we can't put our healthcare system in jeopardy. And we've heard from all the hospitals that they are, very close to the tipping point. So, whether you have a heart attack victim or crash victim or a stroke or cancer surgery and a COVID patient, we can't overwhelm our healthcare system. Now, in terms of some of the supports that Lisa passed over to me, we're very cognizant of the effects that this has. So, for example, on small businesses. And so that's why on Monday, the Premier announced our grant program, Ontario Small Business Grant Program. This is up to $20,000 for businesses, 100 employees or less, if they've lost more than 20% of their revenue year over year, April to April. We've also added for new businesses. A lot of new businesses were started after or just before COVID, so they didn't qualify for a lot of federal programs. So we're going to be putting out criteria. So new businesses, there's about 150,000 new businesses that register every year. Don't know how many are under 100 employees, but this is our way to help on the revenue side through this lockdown, total lockdown, for including the North. Number two, we're reducing the electricity prices for the month of January, the period of 28 days. So that'll allow energy bills for small businesses, for families, for farms, etc., to get the time of use, the low 8.5 cent kilowatt per hour. We've also announced education supports. So we've announced, obviously, that elementary school is going to be closed till, I believe, January 11th. So they'll be doing online, and secondary students right to January 28th. So we put together a program to allow for another $200 for secondary students to receive, in addition to the elementary program, to give them supports. So I think that while this is a very difficult period, and we're promoting small business and places up in the North, a lot of small businesses were caught with not robust e-commerce platforms. So we have a Main Street digital program that will allow small businesses to apply for funding to be able to set up their e-commerce platforms, which is very important to businesses. I've been up to Kenora and Sudbury and Dryden and all parts of the North, and they're able to compete globally because of e-commerce. So there's a number of things that we're doing in a very difficult situation.
Thanks, Peter. I didn't know, Lindsay and Lorne, I know we did a very significant announcement here today of $41 million and 1.4 into your own community. Did you guys want to add just anything as we depart in terms of the announcement that we've just done? You're on mute, Lorne. There we go.
All right. Well, I spoke about there's a number of organizations, some of which are writing, and you'll know, Minister, and Peter and Lindsay will know that prior to being elected as an MPP, as a regional councillor for the region of Durham, and many of these organizations have done such tremendous work in our region for years. But the effect of the investments that you've announced today is really going to allow them to deliver the types of programs and services that families depend on. And I know Lindsay and Peter are regularly talking to their constituents as well, and families are telling us the effect of those programs and services within, whether it's in Whitby, whether it's in Oshawa, whether it's other parts of the region of Durham, the effects that these programs have in helping them to move forward. But most importantly, Minister, giving them some hope going forward in a very, very difficult time that we're living in. It's extraordinary. And that hope is important. It's important across my riding, and I know it's so important in Lindsay's riding as well. And having said that, I'll hand that off to Lindsay to talk about the effect in her riding as well.
Yeah, thank you, Lorne. Minister, maybe I'll give one example. I've had a chance to call each of these organizations in my riding who will benefit from this funding. And I'll speak about the example of Room 217 Foundation. Many who are on this call may not be aware of their work, but they actually provide music therapy to our loved ones in healthcare. And we all know, particularly as patients in the healthcare system can even feel more isolated during this time because of the healthcare restrictions and the restrictions on coming and going, that it's those little things that community organizations like Room 217 can provide to enrich their day, to enrich their life as they're going through a very difficult healthcare circumstance. And Room 217 is working during this time to expand their supports in Durham region for patients in need and their families. And they just were so complimentary of how this critical support at this time was going to really enable them to do that work.
Thanks, Lindsay. And Peter, do you want to wrap it up?
Well, thank you, Minister, for coming to our region virtually to make this announcement. You're always welcome in Durham. You know, we're very proud of the region, all our ridings in Durham. And this means so much to our not-for-profit community volunteers. And I know one of the institutions that got a grant almost burst into tears when they heard about their grant. So this is making a difference in people's lives. So I just want to thank you and your team who've worked. I really mean it when I said at the outset, your team has worked and you have worked tirelessly to help, in this case, a lot of people who are the unsung heroes that work day in, day out, that get no recognition. And so when they do get the support that your leadership has provided is really a testament to your leadership and to the needs of the community. So on behalf of all of us in Durham, the Durham 4, we want to thank you for what you've been doing. And we want to thank all those recipients as well. Thank you for all the tireless work, the unsung work that you do. And as you mentioned, there's more in the fund. You're litigating that right now and looking at opportunities. And we look forward to more great support for not just Durham, but all of Ontario. So thank you.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Minister Bethlenfalvy, and to MPPs Park and Coe, and Catherine and Kathleen for joining us, and to all of our friends in the media. I want to wish you a very happy holidays, Merry Christmas, and I can't wait, as I know all of you can, to turn the clock on to 2021. So all the very best, and please stay healthy and safe.
Thank you.
Thank you, Minister.